This may not be the video you think it's going to be. In fact, it's not the video I set out to make. I was going to take some time and tell you of a wonderfully interesting creature from Scottish folklore. But during my research, many odd things came to light surrounding the creation of the creature and its place in Scottish history, not to mention modern culture. Today, we follow the historic sources throughout Scottish folklore. We travel far to the north, looking at the Shetland Islands, and even across the sea to Scandinavia, in hunt for the origins of the half-man, half-wolf, known as the Wulver. Deep in the Shetland mainland, there is said to exist an ancient creature with the head of a wolf and the body of a man, linked to the Sidhe. This beast was known as the Wulver. You would be forgiven for thinking that this being would be another in a long line of malevolent Scottish fae, being somewhat reminiscent of the European werewolf. But this could not be further from the truth. There is no full moon, no hideous transformation, and no consumption of human flesh. The Wulver has always been itself, and by that I mean it was born as the odd fey beast it is. Covered head to toe in short brown fur, the Wulver was said to make its home digging into the side of steep knolls or hills. It was an intelligent and timid creature, generally friendly to humans, and known to be great fishers. The wolfmen would spend many hours at the river, quietly fishing and minding their own business. One Wulver would sit up on a stone in the middle of a deep stream and spend its days catching and eating fish. That stone is still known to some as the Wulver Stane. The Wulver was a very sedentary creature, but could still be provoked to anger if attacked or harassed. Yet most mentions of the creature are as a guide or friend. They were said to leave fish on the windowsills of poor families, and to rescue lost children, returning them home or keeping them safe in the wilds of Shetland. There are some who have suggested the Wulver may be related to the hellhounds or black shucks, and portend death and disease. Others claim that the Wulver is immortal, and if caught, can lead men to buried treasure or gold. Now we come to the part in the video where I would commonly tell you a collection of interesting folk tales about the creature, then discuss ideas on its identity, humans with medical conditions producing fur, or a kind of missing link to evolved forms of wolves. But in this case, that will not happen, as quite frankly, there are no tales of the Wulver. Let me elaborate a little. There are no non-fiction tales of this creature in Scottish history or folklore. I am sure this comes as a surprise to some of you, and some might even disagree. But from my research, it would seem that all sources of this creature can be directly linked to not only one book, but one person. A woman known as Jessie Saxby, who in 1932 published the first known reference to the Wulver. Her short description of the creature and its habits are what informed the early portion of this video. In the book Shetland Traditional Lore, Jessie states that she personally collected these tales and traditions from the island. And although I can grant that many great folk tales are not substantially referenced or sourced, this book is particularly bad. Saxby gives no names, details, places, or times on where or how she gathered these tales of lore, and considering that this is the first and only known mention of the Wulver, a creature that appears in no other tales, stories, or books from Shetland or the Scottish mainland, it really suggests that the Wulver, and even the tales of the creature, did not exist, but more on that a little later. In her book, Saxby states, "I could not follow any systematic arrangement, and I am not a scholarly person, to sift and clear up fragments of our lore until all the mystical charm of the subject has blown away. My compatriots will take what I give them kindly, and ask for no dry, thorough-learned explanations of what has lived in their souls since childhood." Now, I personally relish in the sifting and clearing of fragments of Scottish folklore, and I do not believe that understanding where these tales come from and the historic culture that inspired them blows away their mystical charm. If anything, I think the opposite to be correct, and that our knowledge on these cultures and their beliefs only increase the intrigue and the love of these tales. But enough of my thoughts for the moment. Let's return to Saxby and the Wulver. Jessie tells in the book that she was born the 9th child of a 9th child, and this would grant her a great deal of information, not only from her large family, but also from a form of second sight or psychic divination, which she was born with, and seems to be a common trait within her family. Records from the time suggest that the 9th child of a 9th child claim may be false, as it states her father was the youngest of 8, but in fairness, I could see this point being a simple mistake, and would not really get caught up in it. Segments of an early draft of Saxby's book were released in a Shetland Times article in January 1930, with the title Trolls and Their Kindred Part 2. Now, trolls are a well-known category of spirits or sidhe from the Orkney and Shetland Islands. The word is commonly used to mean any non-distinct fairy or spirit, and most of the creatures have much in common with the mainland Doine Sidhe, yet with more obvious Norse influences. The term troll is believed to come from the Norse word for troll, which was used to signify not only great Norse giants, but also spirits, ghosts, and other spectres. It is in this very article that Saxby makes the first mention of the Wulver as a specific wolf humanoid creature from Shetland folklore, although in this draft it is spelt with 2 L's and is told to be of troll kindred. So from what I have said so far, you may think that I am suggesting Jessie Saxby completely fabricated the fish-loving wolfman of Shetland. And I suppose in many ways I am, but she did not create the term Wulver. It has existed for many long years, but not in the manner she proposed. So where does the term Wulver truly originate from? To answer that question, we actually have to return to a time before Saxby's Book of Lore. In the 1890s, a Faroese scholar by the name of Jacob Jacobson would begin collecting thousands of Shetland place names, and would eventually publish an article discussing the meanings behind the names. One name, which cropped up many times, was Wol, as in Wolfhull, Wolwolnol, Wolhull, and Wolvershol. This name was derived from the Old Norse word for fairy, Alf, and the word for hill, Hul. Fairy hills, mounds or knolls, can be found all throughout Scottish folklore and history, so it makes perfect sense that these place names were describing fairy hills. In a further statement, Jacobson determines that the Norse vowel, ow, often turns to a wo sound in the Shetland language, thus making Alfhul, Wolfhul. More than this, the scholar directly mentions Wolvershul as an amalgam of the Norse words Alf and Hul with the Nordic-derived Faroese word Ulverhus, or fairy house. So Wolvershul would translate to something like the fairy's home hill, or the hill of the fairy's home. This syncs up perfectly with the well-known Scottish belief that the fairies make their homes in hills or knolls. Even the term Doine Sidhe translates to the people of the fairy mound. So this is why there is no half-man, half-wolf creature in Scottish folklore. The Wulver's hole is the fairy home, and the Wulver Stane is the fairy stone. Even before Saxby's book, it was well known in Shetland what the term was and how it was supposed to be used. Shetland folklorist John Spence, writing in the Shetland Times in 1905, would discuss the place Wulver's hole and explain how this term would be translated as fairy knoll, with no mention of wolf-like creatures. Once more, there is no credible Shetlander of the time that had ever mentioned a wolf creature. Not only that, but the term wolfhole and Wulver's hole were well understood and used commonly years before Saxby's writing. It is said by some that Jessie Saxby had a very vivid imagination, and that she outright rejected the very solid translation. She wanted a more dramatic tale, and so created the entirely fictitious creature known as the Wulver. She would even call her house Wulver's Hole. Jessie is the first and only person in the history of Scottish folklore to mention a half-man, half-wolf creature living in the Shetland Islands, and I for one am comfortable in calling the entire thing a hoax, or at least a great misunderstanding. I don't know if Jessie purposefully created this hoax, and I tend to land on the side that she probably meant no malice. I can even understand how the term could have been misconstrued as the name of a specific creature, given that Jessie herself claimed not to be a studious person and was unlikely to understand Old Norse. A factor that I can very much relate with given my previous pronunciations in this video. I know for a fact that this video will upset some people, as the Wulver has become incredibly popular on the internet and is often found in lists of Scotland's most interesting creatures from folklore. And I can see why. For whatever Jessie actually was, I think we can all agree that she created a wonderful story, but that is all the Wulver is, pure fiction. The Shetland Wolfman exists in no tales and is not mentioned at all before Saxby's book. Not only this, but the people of Shetland have long knew this to be fake, and I for one find the true history and lore of the island to be far more interesting. Thank you for listening, and a special thank you to my patrons who support these videos and help me bring you these stories. I understood going into this video that it would be a bit of a controversial subject, especially given the popularity of the Wulver. I have been asked to cover the Wulver on many occasions, and I know people have been looking forward to me elaborating on the folk tales of the Wulver, but I could not let myself perpetuate this falsehood of Scottish folklore. My videos are always based on multiple references, and I try to find out as much as I possibly can on the subject within the time period, which on occasion, I will agree, is very little. I hope to relate the true folk beliefs and traditions of my country, as I believe they are knowledge that is worth keeping, and something we seem to be losing. I personally think that the believability of the Wulver may in some part come from the Urusk, whom they had a lot in common with. Not only being half man and half beast, but also enjoying fishing, and by most accounts, being friendly and helpful to locals. There are tales of the Urusk from Shetland, and it is understandable to think that the Wulver is a relation to this creature, or perhaps another name, muddled by the influence of the Norse culture on the island. Technically, the Urusk is an Alf, and the Urusk might very well live in a Wulver's hole, but I don't think that any true Scotsman would make the mistake in believing the Wulver's hole to be anything other than it is. But all that being said, if you wish to show me evidence, and references related to the Wulver, which predates Saxby's book, and demonstrate that this truly was a natively held Shetland belief. I would love to see it, and I am nothing if not willing to change my opinion based on a convincing argument and backed up with empirical sources. I hope you all enjoyed the strange dive into the origins of the Wulver and the naming of hills in Shetland. I hope to see you all again next time for more tales of Scottish folklore. Stan Java.